Hello my friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works workshop. Now that I'm not working as much on the world's finest mandolin ever built by a human, now that that's behind me, I'm able to get started again on these repairs that are in the shop. And we've got about 5 instruments still in the shop. One is that old Gibson that I've been working on the finish forever, and I'm getting closer on that, so I'm going to continue to work on that one pretty much off camera. We'll show you the finished results, of course. But right now, I'm turning my attention to the oldest instrument in the shop other than that Gibson, and that is this Yamaha guitar, Yamaha acoustic. A lot of these Yamaha guitars are very highly sought after, especially the ones that have the red label. This one doesn't actually have the red label, but it's of a similar vintage, and it's a well-made guitar, I can tell. You can see there, it's a nice looking back on this, nice looking sides, all of that. It's got a few problems. I guess in the younger days, someone put a pickup in it here, and they want that fixed, that hole fixed. This bridge has been cut way down, way thin, and you can see there how thin it is, I think. Of course, the camera never wants to focus on the thing you want it to focus on. But anyway, it is really cut down thin. It's probably only a 1/4 inch thick here now, which about 300 thousandths is good. 250 thousandths is not enough. Let's just actually measure it and see what it actually is. I always check my calipers, make sure they're zeroed out before we start. So I'll just put it right here and come down and see where we're at. And it's right on 250. So 250 is low. For my money, I really don't want to see them that low. It's just, you're weakening the piece of wood a lot. There's a lot of stress in this area, and when you thin a board down to only a 1/4 inch thick, it's not that strong anymore. It's on the edge of a neck reset. If there was no belly here, I would say we could probably do this without a neck reset. But there's a pretty good belly on this thing too. Unlike so many of them where I see that and I just think, well, I can fix that or I can improve that. On this one, maybe not so much. And you wonder, well, why is this one different? Well, a couple of reasons. They've got a lot of gauze on the inside of this around the bracing and stuff. So I can't do what I would normally do in here. In other words, there's no room left to work. I can't glue to gauze. In other words, I can't put a new bridge plate in here and glue the bridge plate to gauze. That's not a good idea. That would not be a wise thing to do at all. Can I get all the gauze out? No, I think it was done probably from the factory. I don't think you're going to be able to see much of that with this mirror. I'll see if I can give you a better description. Right where the X brace is, typically you see a gauze there, but it's usually just covering just the X brace itself. Well, this one's much bigger than that. It covers the X brace and then it spreads out in a square about so big. You know, it's probably 2.5 inch square, you know, around that. So that takes up quite a bit of real estate right there. On this leg, going down this way on the treble side, there's a lot more gauze. Part of it's over the bridge plate itself, and it goes down over all the other bracing down through here. In other words, there's braces that go this way, and it's covering part of those as well. There's braces that go this way, it's covering part of that. I'll be honest, I thought it was factory done because it's done very well. It's done very well. It's very tight. But the reason I'm hesitant to say it was done at the factory is because it's not done on this brace going this way. I just don't know. I'm no expert on all this stuff, and I don't go looking it up to see how they built them back in the factory because that's really of no concern. I could almost care less. I have to deal with what's right in front of me right at the moment. That's what I care about. And what's right in front of me right at the moment says there's no way to get in there and do a good job of changing anything because of all that gauze. The other complicating factor is the bridge plate that's on this. First of all, it's tiny. It's not even as big as this area right here. Because it's in between the X brace, and it's a very, very thin bridge plate. Very thin. I mean, it's really thin. I'm going to have to guess it's only 50 thousandths thick, which is about half of what it should be. That's what it looks like. And on top of that, if that wasn't bad enough, the bridge plate is made out of spruce instead of a hardwood. So it's a soft wood going this way, and it's only, seriously, 50 thousandths of an inch thick at the most. I can tell that just by looking at it. And it might not even be that thick. It's very thin. So it's got about 5 strikes against me doing anything to the inside to fix this top. So this top is going to remain the curvature that it has, with the exception of that if I put a sturdier bridge on here, a little, and maybe a slightly oversized bridge, and then I put a heavy wooden caul in there, as I glue the new bridge on and press it between that flat caul, I might be able to take just the least little bit of this curve out. I don't expect it to take out very much. I'll be very honest about that. I think it might take out 10% of the curve, if that. If that. We'd be lucky if it got that much. All right. In addition, by the way, that this bridge is cut down real thin, it is also cracked across these holes. So there's just all kinds of problems right here. Yet everything on the inside looks totally structurally firm. It looks perfect. There's nothing loose. Nothing appears to be loose. It looks perfect on the inside. It just is what it is. It's got an arch to it, and there's no fixing that. Not without huge, major surgery. Would it be worth it to do that? I don't think so. I would have to charge hours and upon hours upon hours. And at $100 an hour, it's going to add up pretty darn fast, and it's just not going to be worth it. Okay, so what are the options? Well, the option is to make a new bridge and do like I said. It's also the option to reset the neck, because the neck is basically flat, which I could work with that if it weren't for this. This is bad enough that I can't work with this flat neck. I have to get this neck set at an angle that will work with the height of the bridge. What I plan to do is take this bridge off of here, get a new bridge on here. Then after I get the new bridge on here, then I'll set the angle to the new bridge, because it would do no good to reset this neck on this bridge unless I plan to keep this bridge, and I don't, because this bridge has seen its better days. A lot of information there real quick. I hope that makes sense to you. We got to get started. I think you can see I've got my trusty bridge heater here that I made, my homemade bridge heater, and I'm going to turn that on. And I have it preset for 420 degrees. And you can see right now it's only at like 69.7 degrees. So now that's Fahrenheit, by the way. So it's basically room temperature right now, and it's going to take it a few minutes to heat up. Let's see how long. There we go. There's our first 1/10 of a degree. Now it's going to start climbing pretty fast. It doesn't take very long for this to heat up. I'll show you what it looks like once we get up to temperature, and then we'll see about how long it's going to take us to get this bridge off of here. It's only been a few minutes. In fact, it's only been the length of time it took me to walk out there and knock this down on the wire brush wheel to get it real smooth and slick. I also just took a second there and just kind of honed the end there so it's good and sharp. It is very sharp. And you can see we're up to almost 400 degrees already, which is probably warm enough to begin. I'm going to go ahead and lay my knife on this removal tool, which heats it up really quickly. The transfer on that is much faster than you might think. Just like that much time right there will probably already burn you if you touch the knife. Going to let it get a little bit warmer. The negative of this is you got to be careful, because if you let the knife touch the finish, you're going to melt the finish. So I try not to let it touch the finish. Let's just see if we have any progress. I can tell it's tight. Oh my goodness, this is not going to be a simple one. That's for sure. It's not going to be simple. You know, some of them go fairly easy, some do not go easy at all. This one seems like it's going to fight me. I could be wrong, but right now it really feels tight. Yeah, I see nothing. I see nothing given. I'm going to try to heat these very ends here and see if we can get the heat to transfer through the very end. It does not seem like there's going to be a simple removal here. It's pretty tight. That's usually the way it goes. The ones that absolutely have to come off, they're usually tight. Got to be very careful about this. I probably mentioned this before, but you can slide, if it would just happen to pop loose, you could slide through and cut a big old hole in your arm. Trust me, it can happen. So I try to put pressure on there, but try to realize also that if it cuts loose, I've got to be pulling back. All in the same breath, like. Well, we're getting there. It's going to work. It's going to come loose. It's just going to need a little bit more time. Hard like this, almost anything can happen. I don't like to cut from the front. I really don't, because the bridge is always tilted toward the front and it's hard to get under the front edge. But I'm afraid we might be cutting through the top, so I'm going to try coming from the front edge a little bit anyway and see if it works.
You heard a song about a horse or two. Well, here's one more and I swear it's true. The finest horse you've ever seen. His name was Phantom 614. A proud young stallion with head held high. His coat like satin under candlelight.
I can tell you that blade is very hot because even the edge here is burning me. It's pretty hot. I have to be careful how I touch it. I'm really afraid I might be digging in. It's hard to tell. You can't really tell until you get it popped off of there.
His mane and tail, oh how they sheen. His name was Phantom 614.
There we go. Maybe. We might have got it that time. Yeah, I'm not looking for good things. I have a feeling this is going to be ugly. The other problem with this one is because that bridge plate is so soft, and then you got the soft top, there's really nothing to pry against. Whenever this is this hard, because this bridge is much harder than the top or the bridge plate, then the knife just has the natural, motion to go through the wood, through the softer wood. I mean, it's just physics and nature, It's the way it is, and there's not a whole lot you can do about that. As I've often said, there is no zipper. You just have to break these things apart. That's really what you're doing. You can try to sugarcoat it all you want, but you're basically breaking them when you take them apart. All things considered, not a horrible outcome. I would like to have seen it better, but it's not bad. There's a little bit of wood missing here, and I can peel that off and glue that back. The rest of it's not very bad at all. Considering how good or bad it could have gone, I'll take that right there. In that worst section here, I'm trying to use tight bond and, to glue these fibers back down in here, and it's working. But honestly, I probably should have just used the CA glue because there's no good way to clamp this. The tight bond works better if you can clamp it, but since I can't really clamp this, I probably should have just used CA glue. That's what I'm going to do on the rest of it, I guess, on the rest of the places. I'm just going to blow off the loose scraps because there's not much point in trying to glue them. And I'm going to just put some CA glue down under these longer pieces that are broken out. And then I'll just take this tool here, mash them into place, and maybe even put a little bit more CA glue on them because it soaks in so much. It's not easy when you're dealing with just little tiny shards like that. Off camera, I've CA glued all of this stuff down, and I actually ran a very thin amount of CA glue over most of the area, and the reason is there was just so many shards and so many things. It feels really solid now. I don't feel really anything loose, so that's good. We can level this back out now, flatten it out, and I think it's going to be fine. I'm going to first make a new bridge, and then we'll lay it on there and mark it out, and then we'll get started cleaning this area up. Well, we're at the bandsaw. I have this free-floating fence that's magnetized, and it's difficult to get it square, see, because you can put it anywhere. So long ago I made this square for this, and while it might not be perfectly square, and I think it is pretty darn close, it's square to the T-slot. I'm sliding it up here, and then I'm going to try to measure the gap here. I want about 350 thousandths or so would be good. So off camera I've set this to about 3/8 of an inch. That's about 375 thousandths. That's a good place to start, partly because this block of wood I'm going to use is really rough sawn, so I'll have to sand quite a bit off of one side anyway to get it flat, and then off the other side. So I kind of think we're okay in that ballpark there. In fact, this is so off, I think I'm going to go over to my sander and knock a little bit of this down right now. Well, you just saw me slice that piece off. It looks like it's going to be just fine. I haven't actually measured it yet, but I think we're fine. I always try to cut it so that we have it quarter sawn. The annual growth rings go through the wood vertically here now, see? And that makes this much stronger, and it's also nice looking, I think, that way. So if we have this in the right order, you just saw me slice this off. You can see it's more than enough to cover the space that we have there. I'm going to check the thickness now because I didn't actually check it yet, and I'm guessing it's going to be in the neighborhood of 3/8. 390, so it's even thicker than 3/8. So we're good. We got plenty of wood to work with there. I'd like to see this end up in the neighborhood of 325 thousandths, somewhere in there. A little over 300 thousandths, pretty much I'm good with. So I'm going to go over to the thickness sander now. I'm probably not going to film that, but I'm just going to run it through until I'm satisfied with the smoothness and the straightness, flatness, etc. Well, as I mentioned off camera, I sanded this down to 350 thousandths. In fact, I think it's right on the money. Well, that one says 349 and a half. That's a half a thousandth of an inch. Pretty small. That one says 350 and a half right there. So I think a lot of it depends on how well you squeeze this thing, because you can squeeze it a thousandth or a half a thousandth of an inch. So anyway, we're really close to 350 thousandths. That's a little bit on the thick side, but then again, I'm thinking of all the problems we have here. This is definitely set up too light right now. It just is. You know, now if you played it with extra light strings the way it's set up, you might be okay. But very few people like to play an acoustic guitar with extra light strings. So I'm going to, beef this up a little bit. I'm not going to go crazy with it, because if you go crazy with it, then any kind of thing you do that way, then you have a point of diminishing return, So I think if you left this 375, you would definitely be way too thick. 350, I think you're on the margin of being too thick, but I don't think you are too thick. I think you can get away with 350. At least that's where I'm starting at. We could always go thinner. It's not a problem going thinner. It's much more difficult to add more mass. All that being said, I'm going to trace this around here. I'm going to leave about a full 1/16 of an inch in front and probably a full 1/16 of an inch in back. That'll help cover up the scarring for one thing, but it will, more than that, it will give us a bigger surface to flatten this out with and make a better connection to flatten this whole top. So I'm going to do most of that off camera in terms of tracing this, and I'll show you the next step though as I get to it. Alright, in order to keep this simple, what I did was I just made myself a strip of wood that's exactly at 1/8 inch thick, 125 thousandths. I'm going to lay this on the front here and line up the front edge of this and push the bridge right up to that. And then all I really have to do is just trace the bridge outline. And that adds a 1/16 to the front and to the back by doing it that way. Tracing it a few times, make sure the pencil mark is in there really good. And all I have to do then is just extend these ends down to the front there. Now, I could make the ends a little bit longer, and I probably will when I actually saw them. Doesn't really look real square, so I think I'll just square it up while I'm at it, and then that'll help too. I'll square up this end here and add just a pencil mark width or something just to make it a little bit bigger. Not very much bigger on the ends. So there you go. We'll just trace that out. I'm also going to mark that this is the top so that I don't get it mixed up, and I'll even write on here bottom just in case something gets sanded off. And now we know, and we can keep it in the proper orientation. Alright, so I'm going to cut that out on the bandsaw. I'm not going to film that. You've seen many cuts with a bandsaw, so we'll move on from there. Well, I got her cut out and sanded the edges smooth, and you can see that there is a little bit of space all the way around. Not a lot, but just a little bit, and every little bit matters when you're talking about strength on something like this. In other words, if you took that 1/8 inch piece of wood and tried to break it, you'd be surprised how strong it would be, even though it's only an 1/8 inch, but you add that 1/16 to the front and back, and when you spread that out over a large surface, that really does add a lot of stiffness, more than you would actually think. So now that I've got that in pretty darn good order, in very good shape, about a 1/16 all the way around, I think what I'll do is, while it's flat, might as well make it easy on myself, go ahead and cut the holes back in this thing. And I think what I'll do there is I'll just trace the holes that are here. I've got it lined up really good. So if I just trace these holes, especially the end holes, then I should be able to line up a hole jig that I have and help myself cut some nice holes here. I'll go ahead and trace them all to see if it lines up, but mainly just the two end holes is really what's important, as long as I've got it lined up well. This probably won't show up real well, but you can see my holes that I have drilled, or that I have penciled in there. This is my shortest drill pattern that I have, hole pattern. And when I line up one end hole, the other one comes about right here. See, like this is coming about right here. So this pattern, this hole pattern here is very small. It's probably easier to show you if I do it this way. In fact, I could even put the pin in here, and that'll prove the point, I think, if the pin will go through the hole. Yep, it did. All right, and you can see here that this hole here is way past where this is. In other words, about here would be center of this hole. So we're off by 2/3 of the hole. There's only about 1/3 of the hole showing down in there. You probably can't see that, but that's all there is showing, is about 1/3 of the hole. So I can't use my pattern. All I can do is just go ahead and line it up with this. I mean, I can take my little scratch awl like this and center my eye, the hole as centered as I can, and punch a little deal there, make a little divot. That way I can get my drill bit to go in there a little bit better, perhaps. But that's about all I got. And I would prefer to do it this way rather than cut a new hole pattern, because the top is already weak on this guitar. It's just a weak top. And because it's weak, I don't want to create any new holes or any new spaces. I would prefer to just stay right in the same holes, and then that way we're not going to weaken the top anymore at all. That's all I got, and that's the way I'm going to do it. So I'll go drill these holes. I'm not going to show the drilling process either, because that's all that's going to be is just pushing a drill press through those spots. Well, looky there. Those holes lined up almost perfectly. You can probably see through, yeah? And you can see I've got the same gap all the way around. So that's as good as that can be done by hand. I'm happy with that result. We'll move on to the next step. Well, that was a bit premature. I probably should have just left the camera on, because what the next step really is, I think, is going to be narrowing down these ends. And all I'm going to do there is I'm going to put a mark here in front and back where this line comes across. So I'll just do that, put that line there. You know, I don't know. I don't know if they're square, but they're pretty close to square. I think I'll just split the difference there, go right between them, and make it square. And I'll do the same thing here if necessary. These are a little closer to square, but again, I'll split the difference and just do that. Now I'll go over to my thickness sander and poke the end of this in there till I get this sanded down kind of like this. I'm going to leave this thicker. Right now this one is, well, it's only 118. Actually, I'm getting 113 right there. So that's pretty small, really. 113. This side's much bigger. This is the treble side, but it's 120, even up to 135. I was planning on leaving this about 130, 135. I'm going to get both ends really close to 135, and I think I'm going to call it good right there. I'm definitely not going to go down to the low numbers that this side has. That's for sure. And the reason is, again, we want the strength. So 135 thousandths, I think, will be nice enough to look good, and yet it'll be nice and strong. So there's where we're headed. Well, I pulled down both ends in my sander, and they're both at 136 thousandths of an inch, which I think is perfectly fine, and that will give us some strength. These wings, I'm glad the wings don't go too far, because that also gives more strength in this full length here, which I like that. So I think all in all, we've got a much, much stronger bridge than what we had here, especially since this one was thinned down so thin, you know. So you can see the difference in the edge thickness there, how much thinner this bridge is. And we'll set the neck to this new bridge, and it should be just fine then. Off camera, I've shaped this quite a bit more. I've rounded off the back edges. I've rounded off all the other edges. And I've shaped two pins, well, the holes, to fit the pins well enough to kind of lock it in place. It's not perfectly locked in, but it's pretty close. And so I can kind of hold it there and keep it in place. And now I think I'll just take sharp X-Acto knife, and I'll even go over and sharpen it a bit more on my stone, and then we'll trace around this. Off camera, I sharpened this tip of this up a little bit more on my little fine stone, and I went ahead and put the rest of these pins in here, even though I don't have the middle holes tapered. I find that just gives it a little bit more stability, a little more less wiggle. I also flattened it off under there a little bit more so this couldn't rock. I just want it as good as I can get it before I trace this. That gave it a almost perfect outline around what was already there. So take a look at the before, and then I'll clean this all off and I'll show you the after. Once again, I just clean it off with my little homemade gadget here. It's just a piece of aluminum, just plain old bar stock aluminum that was just in the scrap bin. This knurled part has no bearing, it was just on there. The only thing is I did cut the slot here at a slight angle, and then I rounded off the bottom of this, and then I just put a little round finger plane blade in here so that I can get in here and twist it and stuff. I like it better than a flat bladed chisel. You can use a flat bladed chisel if you don't have this, but I'm just showing you what I did, and this is what I prefer to use. I find it works the best. You know, it's a short stubby handle. It's good for just this detail cleanup work. Yeah, you could probably make something better than this, but this is what I have and it works pretty well. Once you got your score line there, you basically can break the finish off on inside the score line, and it typically breaks right on the line as long as you've cut your score line through the finish. I try not to cut into the wood any more than I have to. I try just to cut the finish. It's going to take me a little while to clean it all up, but you'll see what it looks like here when I make some better progress. I thought you might find it interesting to see that, you know, I've cleaned it off back to my line. Now, my line is barely through the finish. The line that was cleaned off before, which I think it's good that they cleaned it all the way out to the line, don't get me wrong, but they cut the line a little deep into the wood. So they're down into the wood another 10 or 20 thousandths of an inch. So that weakens the top also. By me expanding this a little bit, we're going to cross over their cut line, which will help strengthen it a little bit. But anyway, you know, it just is what it is. I just pointing these little minor details out. Every little detail can matter. Not everything matters, but there's a lot of detail that does matter. And whenever you start weakening a top, considering how much force is on a top, anytime you weaken it, it's not a good thing. You want to try to, if anything, you want to try to find ways to strengthen it. You don't want to find ways to weaken it. Those ways that you strengthen it obviously have to take acoustics into consideration. So that's what we're trying to do here. There's still quite a bit to get off of here, and sometimes I have to go back over my score line and score it just a hair deeper. And again, I'm not really cutting much into the wood. I'm just trying to make sure the finish is broken so that when I lift up the finish, it doesn't tear out the finish past my line. I can take the blade and put it in the crack, the line that I've cut, and rake it back towards me sometimes, and that'll sometimes pull the finish off. And then that way you're pretty well assured you're not going to ruin your finish out past the line. You just use any technique you can. You just think through it ahead of time, and you try to think of what are my consequences going to be to whatever it is I'm doing, you know. Like right here, the consequences, if you push this all the way through, and if your line's not cut through, it's going to lift this right back through there. It could easily do that. So I want to make sure that my line's cut real good right there. I'm pretty sure it is. It is, before I start lifting this up. Because if I lift this up and it's not cut, it's going to create a real problem.
Though just a young man at the time, I knew that one day he'd be mine.
I can't really overemphasize how clean you want this, and the reason is because if you have anything left there, it's going to hold this up and it won't sit down in the finish thing there and stay stable when you glue it. It's fitting down in there pretty well. I think I can take the pins out now, and I think it's going to feel like it's down in there, but I'm not sure it is yet. Actually, it's not, because there's a hump. There's kind of a hump in here. I'm going to have to get this all flat and level yet. It's just not flat enough yet. So what's my choice for leveling this out? Well, I'm going to take this toothed blade, and I'm going to go like at a 45 and cut this. And the reason I want a 45 is if I go straight with it, I'm going to tear out more that's some of that loose fibers. If I go at a 45, I've got a chance of cutting across it. Plus, it levels it because you've got ridges going this way, and going this way, it will level those ridges across each other. If I go straight across it, it's too bumpy and it'll grab the grain too much. So you just kind of have to learn how to do these things, and a 45-degree angle is really good on a lot of things when you're going cross grain.
And I would ride there like a king up on the back of 614. The trainer said, son, he can't be rode, but stay away, boy, or you'll be thrown. He said that horse is just plain mean. His name was Phantom 614.
It's not too bad. Doesn't feel real stable, I'll be honest, because
First of all, the finish is very thin on this. Second of all, this big hump in the middle is causing issues. So, but it does, I do think I'll be able to keep it still once I get it there. I'm going to look at this some more and maybe put some short straight edges across here and see where I can see any big bumps or things. Just little things like that to help figure out where the problems are. Yeah, it's definitely a hump there, though. You can see the hump. Yeah, it's a significant hump across here. So this is going to help it. It's not going to fix it, but it's going to help it. It's going to maybe keep it from getting worse. I'm just going to lightly scratch this. This is not like deep scratches. This is just to get rid of the glaze and the real slick surface that's there. And, you know, it's still going to make pretty much full contact. It's just to get rid of that shiny, slick finish. When you sand these hard, exotic woods, they get a kind of a oily glaze, a thick glaze on them, and you're just better off slightly roughing it. And again, it's not like you're trying to make trenches or ditches. In fact, if you felt this, you'd still say it was pretty darn smooth. It's just to get rid of that sheen that's there. And I'll wipe it down with a little bit of acetone, and then we'll move on from there. That was pretty clean just before I wiped that down, so you can see how dark it is. Now, that's nowhere near as bad as the Padauk, but you know, rosewood is similar in that it does the same kind of thing. So it's a good idea to wipe it down a little bit, then just dry it back off, and that acetone evaporates really quickly and leaves virtually no residue. All right, we're almost ready to glue this on. I've got a problem inside here. Ordinarily, I want to use a big flat caul to flatten this out. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that because of all the gauze and the weird stuff that's in here. Maybe so. I can probably still get a caul in here. I'm going to try that and we'll see how it looks. You know, I'm checking here to see if I think all this is going to fit, and if it does fit, it's just barely going to fit. This is a real thick caul, but it's not very big. I've got a bunch of different sizes, and I've tried all the sizes. This is the only one I can get to fit in the space. So that's the one I think I'm going to use. Can I get it in here, get it clamped up? Yeah, I could use some two-way tape or something, but what's the fun in that? Again, just testing it dry first and just trying to maneuver everything into place. It looks like that should at least function. I really wish I could have something in those holes to line it up a little better. I think I can line it up well enough by eye on the peripheral, on the perimeter, I mean. I think I can line it up that way, and we'll just have to go with that. I'll get some glue and we'll get started. I've put two-way tape on this, and that's good and bad. The good part is it might help hold it up in there. The bad part is this thing is so rough in here that I doubt this is going to do anything at all. In case anybody thinks I've got that backwards, I don't. The sticky side is up, otherwise my fingers would be sticking to it. It's in there as well as I can get it in there, and it's just barely sticking. I hope it'll stay long enough for me to line this up, get glue on this, and get it going. Well, it answered that. It already fell out. There's a lot of tips and tricks that sort of work, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. Most of the time I really can't get gravity to work for me, but you can see there that when I don't want it to work, it works. I'm going to put, pretty good amount of glue on here and then spread it around and spread it on both parts. All right, I'm going to spread it around. Try not to get it down in the holes very much. Spread that part last. I don't like to have a ton more than I need because the squeeze out is just makes it that much more difficult, and it makes it that much more difficult to locate the bridge and keep it still where it doesn't slide around. So I don't want a ton more on here than I need. Now I'm actually in the cleanup mode and wiping more off and getting rid of it here on my rag. And then I'll go ahead and spread a little bit around these holes. And I've said this before, but you want to work it in. You'll be surprised how many little potholes there are. You'd think that they would squeeze out and cover, but they don't necessarily. A lot of times there's air trapped and they'll just stay open. Wiggle it back and forth till you know you got all the glue everywhere. Okay, now we'll put this back on here. Line up the holes down through there as best I can. Maybe even use this to help line up the holes a little bit more temporarily, because you can't leave it on there very long. Yeah, and the problem with even using them at all is I have to put the caul in there, and these sticking through there won't allow the caul to go up in there. All right, so let's try the caul once more, and hopefully it'll stay this time long enough for me to get a clamp in there. All right, so I've kind of got it in there, and I've kind of got this in there. Whoops. Actually, no, I don't. I thought I had that cranked up all the way, but I guess I grabbed the wrong clamp, of course. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the holes, well, the holes are lined up pretty good. Boy, I wish I could see that better and tell that. Once I put this on there, there's no checking it. Now I'm going to do a lot of cleanup and alignment before I go any further. Well, you can see I've got the clamps on it as well as I can do it. I had it cleaned off really good before I squeezed them down, and I couldn't see any border anywhere. So as far as I can tell, I'm lined up perfectly, and if I'm lined up perfectly, that means that the holes should be lined up perfectly since they were before. So I don't know, that's as good as I can do, you know. It may not be perfect by the strictest measurements, but it's as perfect as you can do by hand. So we'll just have to call that good enough, because it's as good as I can do. Now I'm just taking a paintbrush and washing down the glue to keep it soft so I can clean it all up. If you let the glue get hard, it's much harder to clean up. I'll wipe it down a few different times, clean it up 2 or 3 times. Each time it gets a little cleaner. Well, as far as I can tell, that's as good as it can be. There's no way to know if it's perfect until we get the clamps off, but I think it's going to be fine. It feels really snug and tight, so we're going to let that set overnight, and we'll address the next situation, which is the neck reset, and we'll address that in the morning. Friends, it's the next morning, and the bridge has set overnight, so we will now see what we accomplished, if anything. Let's get the clamps off and get all that out of here. That caul could fall out here. It's got two-way tape on it, so maybe it's still pressed up there. Let's see if we can even get the caul out. That two-way tape, oh my gosh. Yeah, it came out. Sometimes that two-way tape is a real negative because it puts it up in there so tight sometimes you just can't get it out. With all that clamping pressure, I mean. Yeah, that feels good. Did we really help this much? Probably not, honestly. It's still got quite a rock to it, there's no doubt. Yeah, it's still a good 1/8 inch high spot in the middle. Now, some people may say this has an arched top, and, you know, I doubt it. I don't think so. It doesn't look like it was made that way to me. But regardless, we did what we did because this bridge, the old bridge, had gotten so thin due to the neck angle and everything that we needed to put a hefty bridge on here to keep this thing from changing anymore. And so this should help stabilize it at least, minimum of that. So we did good there, and now we're going to need to get this neck out of this thing in order to reset it, to set it at the height of the new bridge. So I am not going to try to slot and intonate this until I get the neck reset, because that could affect the intonation as well. So we want to get everything stable before we set it up to play.